I'm personally for it. I think we are at a historical moment. Well, what did you call it, a cliff? So my question was, socialist alternative. I've heard noises like they're thinking of like launching into like a broad campaign. You can answer, or really anyone from SALT. I see people here. Like, is there truth to that? Are they proposing a merger? What's going on? Because like I would like just jump on board.
All right, so want to speak?
We're not considering a merger of any time. Whenever we run an election campaign, we try and make it as broad and as encompassing as possible, and encourage other groups. And like within Boston and within all the cities we run in, we've been endorsed by the Green Party. In Washington State, the last time we made appeals to the ISO to support the Swan campaign and to get involved in building a slate of candidates. Actually, this time we were running 3 candidates, but we were appealing for a broader slate of candidates. So we do want to broaden as much as possible an independent challenge to the parties of big business. And we will continue to try and build as broad as movement as possible. But there are differences, and as regards to strategy and tactics, and but we're willing to kind of debate and to have that kind of an agenda. When we propose a slate, our slate would be opposition to budget cuts, to taxing public sectors, and I think there could be agreement from not just the left, but from community organisations that that as city budgets come under attack, that a defence of that and a refusal to accept corporate money could be the basis of a building of a broader movement.
Okay, Tim, one of the questions was directed to you partially, but I'll just respond to the first question.
What was the question?
I guess I was just challenging the demography's destiny.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I definitely don't believe that that I never said that because of the demographic shifts that's going to play into the hands of the Democrats. I mean, it can go a lot of different ways, but certainly it's going to change the politics, right? After the last election, you read a lot about how the Republican Party's well, can we continue to have as you mentioned, the possible fault lines there. Can we continue to have sort of a racist, white supremacist, wing whenever, we obviously need to incorporate pro-business elements of, other emerging demographics. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how that's all going to shake out. And I'm frankly, not really interested in making those kind of long-term predictions. I am interested in seeing tangible challenges done at the local level in some of the ways that maybe some of these folks are doing, and I support 100%. I'm let 100 flowers bloom. It's try stuff. But I think that overall, with the demographics as destiny, I think that to me it's not so much. Maybe that's overstating it, but I think that it sees where intervention points are, and I think that what our organization, with Philly Socialists, has had a lot of success is actually just trying to organize millennials. Not exclusively millennials. We have a pretty wide range of people who are different age groups and so on. But we've, for example, in the U.S., the left is a lot of times focused on the campuses, right? We're going to recruit on the campuses, recruit on the campus. We need to look at that strategy again. Are the campuses the hotbeds of activism than they were in the 60s? I don't really think so. We actually had less success when we were trying to organize originally on the campuses in Philadelphia, and we actually just went into the neighborhoods where the young people who were out of college, who had all this student debt, and they were yo, sign me up, I want to do something. Maybe over time periods, the revolutionary actors, change, not, as the broad working class, but in the specific context. And so for me, I think that's a demographic hungry for change. You saw that in Occupy, you see it all over the world. That's what I mean by demographics is destiny. Not so much that the outcome is, in the final analysis, going to go one way or the other. Though I hope that Marx was right about that. But in the sense that should inform our strategy and where we're intervening at, and shape our tactics as well.
Okay, unless anyone's dying to answer those questions, like another 2. I'm going to go to Jody as well as here in the front.
I have a couple of different questions. The first one is a combination to Tim and Seamus. Seamus, I'm wondering, you said that you are interested in working with a broad group, right, of socialists or people who are willing to work with you. But I want to push, how come not more steps toward an actual convergence, like the questioner who was right before me? was asking you, like, why not try to bring the socialist parties closer together for, you know, a stronger, more inspirational, better force? So that's the first question. Tim, you're like, and this is actually something I was thinking at the last panel. You were emphasizing experiments and multiple experience, and just now you said, you know, try stuff. But isn't part of building, particularly a radical left, also saying, hey, we're going to stop trying absolutely everything and narrow down and be willing to make some sacrifices? Yes, this might have been my pet issue, but for the sake of strengthening and focusing and concentrating, not everything goes. And so I wanted to hear what you had to say about that. And then for Carl, I love the party within a party strategy, but I'm not sure I completely understand it, because it seems like it really does involve a really kind of split consciousness, where on the one hand you have to do so much work to participate, you know, to build a campaign, to raise money, to do that work, and then undermine it all from a different perspective. So if the goal is to exhaust the electoral system, right, which is one of the things I thought you said that was really good, why do the work to actually support it or buttress it? Why not exit it and build something elsewhere? Like, so, and I think it might just be the limitation of my understanding of the party within a party strategy, but it seems so split that it builds something it's trying to undermine.
Okay, Mike, we'll come back to you and we'll let the panelists answer those because you're direct. So Seamus, for you.
I don't think it's a good idea or the most productive thing to try and merge every socialist grouping, because I don't think real change is going to emerge from small little socialist groups. I think it's going to emerge from, you know, grassroots rank and file movements. That's not to say that there can't be the utmost cooperation within, you know, not just socialist groups, but, you know, many groups that are fighting on day-to-day issues. And wherever there's an opportunity to actually build an alliance, a slate of candidates, a social alternative will be very much in favour of it. And in a number of areas, social alternative sister organisations I'm familiar with, being from Ireland, have built alliances of other left groups and got built caucuses within, got members of parliament elected. So we are in favour where there can be an agreement formed to make the most effective resources on the electoral field. At the same time, each organisation having the ability to debate, to criticise, and to offer different strategies. Because from that debate and discussion, the best tactics can emerge. So I think that is a better strategy than try and mix every, grouping and try and forcefully bring them together. I think you'll just have one mess rather than a clear way forward.
Yeah, I think your question's, one that gets solved basically in the practice of how the groups operate, I agree that one of the big problems is that this is what we saw with Occupy, where it started with, everybody kind of, protesting on the same page at the encampments, but then there are all the working groups, and then the working groups kind of had their own thing, which was the most important, and they split off into a million different subsets. At least that's what happened in Philadelphia. I think that one of the things that ideologically we need to do is reject single issueism. Single issueism has been one of the predominant activist forms, at least in the 80s and 90s that I'm familiar with. We need clean water, or even the environmental movement and the climate change. I think that that's a very easily co-optable form. And if you can get people not so much to be involved in an issue, but have an identity that's based more around a set of values, or or a social identity, I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, I'm whatever. I think that actually leads people to transform their sense of individualism away from the hyper-individualism that we have in this country, which obviously is a major organizing bloc. I also think that the way to do this is the democratic centralist model, in my opinion. If it worked anywhere, it definitely does not work for the United States because of the hyper-individualist culture. We have to have a culture of very open debate, which is one of the reasons that I like the North Star. But there also has to be a level of unity of action. And to me, the way to achieve that is to have democratic processes that actually hold accountable decision makers. So one of the things about Occupy was there was no leadership, supposedly. So no one was responsible for anything that happened, and then if the strategy needed correcting, there was no way to vote in an alternative slate of candidates to move things differently. So I think having learning what we can from the consensus process and from like the the innovations organizationally of Occupy Wall Street and the anarchist movement, but also like not throwing the baby out with the bathwater as far as bourgeois democracy and things like Robert's rules and stuff. Like I think that kind of thing can really lead to a level of group cohesion, and certainly it's effective for many other types of organizations.
Carl? Two things. One, PDA, in addition to the formulation I gave you, a party within a party, also mainly describes itself as inside-outside. What that means is that as an organization, we are engaged in mass social movements. And we're not just engaged in politics. Politics is a small, elections are a small part of what we do. We're mainly engaged in the mass social movements. And in those mass social movements, we try to represent the political choices that exist. And within the arena of electoral politics, we try to bring the demands of the mass social movements. Let me give you the two examples we have in where I live is healthcare, not warfare, and we take Medicare for all. We went to every labor council, every labor union in Western Pennsylvania, and got them to sign on to HR 676. We went to town councils, county councils. We got 3 county councils to sign on to HR 676. We got 3 city councils to sign on to HR 676. In other words, we're using Gramsci's notion of the long march through the institutions. All this is done without question of the election. So that's part of our inside. That's part of the outside aspect of our inside strategy. And within the Democratic Party ranks, we fight for the Medicare for all, which is not the same as Obamacare. We will oppose the Republican right trying to defeat Obamacare, but we explain that Obamacare is mainly a gift to the insurance companies, and what you really need to work toward is Medicare for all. So that's our view. That's how we represent a different view and wage class struggle within the Democratic Party. The struggle between Medicare for all and Obamacare is a class struggle, and so we continue to wage that. The other one is windmills, not weapons, and we use that as a way to do our anti-war work. It's an emphasis. We do anti-war work, but we tie it to the question of jobs, not war, and particularly green jobs, windmills. We're into building windmills. The steelworkers love windmills. Leo Gerard can get up and give you a speech on exactly how many tons of steel go into, and how many moving steel parts go into each windmill. So we love windmills, and we want them to replace the war machine. So we campaign on that, and we try to campaign. And that's part of the platform that we work for. Now, the way that spells out is that we have the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which represents most of our views in the forms of bills, and then they get declared off the table, and there's a fight over them. So that's, again, struggle exacerbating the contradictions. We were governed a long time by a blue dog Democrat. We do not support every Democratic Party candidate. We cherry pick. We have our platform. We go to the candidates. Do you agree with our platform? If you do, we will work for you. We will support you. If you don't, forget about it. Our blue dog candidate, he wouldn't even put Obama's name on his website or a single piece of literature in 2008 and in 2012. So we made sure that he lost the election. Our blue dog Democrat, Jason Altmaier, is no longer. We got a goofy Republican Tea Party guy who's not much different, to tell you the truth. But we made sure that he lost the election.
Okay.
We weren't the only ones who made sure he lost the election, but we played a role in it.
We're going to go to Michael here.
Okay, so I'm the state treasurer of the Progressive Party of Vermont. So anybody who wants to find out how we went from an extremely sectarian leftist political formation to electing Bernie Sanders, the independent mayor of Burlington, to creating a statewide party over 30 years, talk to me. We do have 3 people in the state Senate, which is 10%. We do have 5 people in the state House, and they are respected for their leadership on issues, even by the Democratic leadership. although they are stymied at every point where there's money involved. I have to say that. We are much more effective leaders in the legislature on social issues because most of the Democrat incumbents agree with us on social issues than on taxing the rich, because that's where the power structure rubber hits the road. I would argue that I don't know how many people here consider themselves Marxists, but if you're a Marxist, you understand that contradictions exist everywhere. And the fact that it doesn't make sense to somebody, or it's not clear how supporting people within the Democratic Party can lead to independent politics, suggests to me that you haven't studied the contradiction, because that's actually how it's happened. That's how the Republican Party was formed within the Whig Party. It's an inside-outside strategy, but it's not a strategy in the minds of the same people necessarily. In other words, there's different forms and different people working on it. I don't want to talk too much, but I have a question first. How did you deal with the spoiler issue, and who won the election?
Well, the Democrat won the election, and
So there was no spoiler issue.
there was no spoiler issue, and actually some local political analysts started writing about how they thought that, well, it was actually, it was analysts and Republicans sending me hate mail that I spoiled the election for the Republicans. So it's like, you know, you can't win with the major parties. So the Democrat won. And I mean, myself, I saw it as a pretty significant victory for the left and for progressives in central New York, because we basically defeated a Tea Party Republican. It was maybe, I can't remember what it was, but I got 8% and the Democrat, he got like 40. It was like near 50%, I think. So it was a fairly significant defeat of the right. And how did we deal with the spoiler argument? Well, sometimes we kind of made a joke out of it, because the only other times this Democrat had won was that when there was a Green in the race running, and every time he lost was when it was just two candidates. So it was kind of a local it was like a local joke. But basically, I would just point out the economic policies and how they were on things like taxes and the big, the issues that were very talked about in the past election, like the deficit, for example, showing how their policies were much closer, about how the tax policies proposed by the Democrat wouldn't address the deficit, and how the Republican also had no plan to address the deficit. And I would talk about progressive taxes and how they were, and we wouldn't be in favor of spending them to first fix the deficit. We want to invest in jobs, but this idea that they're actually trying to show how they're much closer than myself and the Democrat were. And also, we discussed issues like hydrofracking or nuclear power, because also it was, I think it has to do, like, in terms of strategy, the one thing, I think it was the person in the back alluded that, this continuum of opinions of how to interact with the Democratic Party. And one thing that our local Green Party looks at is, we don't want to run against progressive Democrats that we think will be good people to work with once they're in office. And so this race was very intentional that we ran, because it was a very economically conservative Democrat, and also on issues that are really important to people in upstate New York, for example, hydrofracking. He would say things like, well, I personally oppose fracking, but I don't think we should ban it. And so, what does that mean? How is someone that, is concerned about fossil fuel addiction and climate change supposed to look at that? The same thing with nuclear power. Well, actually, they both had similar positions on nuclear power. So it was really the social issues, like abortion, basically, that they were very divergent. And also, so that was kind of how we dealt with the spoiler issue, trying to show that, I would never say that they're exactly the same, because I think that, that's not true, but they both would represent factions or elements within the major parties that are really, I think, the worst. Economically conservative, but posing as progressive based on positions on social issues, and a Tea Party Republican whose positions are based on, not on facts. And so it was really challenging dealing with the spoiler issue, and so, yeah, it's just something you deal with as a third-party candidate. But that's why, I would say an opportunity on local elections is that they're much more likely to be uncontested, and so it becomes less of a problem for state office or local office.
Okay, questions? Jose.
Yeah. That's not a question, a bit of information. On regroupment, the left of the 1960s is dead. Forget about it. Okay? There's 6 members of the Solidarity's National Committee here, including myself. We had a meeting 3-4 weeks ago in Chicago. We said one of the top priorities we want for our convention is to get a hold of these guys in these post-Occupy groups like the North Star, like the Philly Socialists, and get into conversation with them because we think this is where the future of the left is going. None of them are here except me. I asked the comrades last night, has Warren in Philadelphia talked to you? No. Has people in New York talked to you? No. Solidarity is the sect, is the anti-sect sect. It's the sect that was set up to try to break up the sects.
Good luck.
And that's what's happened to it. The rest of the left is worse. The rest of the left is worse. Marx and Engels had a brilliant insight, which is when you're through with what the organization was set up to do, destroy it. Put dynamite under it and blow it up. That's what they did with the Communist League. They did that with the Communist League twice. They joined in 1947, and as soon as the revolution broke out, they said, now's the time to dissolve the Communist League. It wasn't set up to do a revolution. It was set up to do propaganda. And they put it back together because they thought, well, there's an interregnum between the first phase of the revolution and the next phase of the revolution. Well, it turned out not to be. So by 1852, they said, forget it. And they split the Communist League and walked out of it. And then they had, the World Communist Movement was represented by this outfit that is only known by what the Republican called it, which was Dr. Marx's Circle, that met in the upstairs room of a London pub every week for many years. And then the First International came around, and they joined that, because that was the real thing. But when that got all messed up, they blew it up. They said, let's send it to America and see if they can do something with it. And this is I think, a very important lesson, is don't keep organizations around. They are an obstacle. I disagree with Brother Carl over there. I don't think it's about I think it's about movement. It's about movement. It's about social movement. The organizations need to be an expression of the social movement.
Okay, another question, and again, try to question. We'll go to Philip.
I wouldn't hope. You only work nice people that you know.
Oh, I'll get to you. Don't worry about it.
We barely know each other. Only met for the first time on Wednesday.
Yeah.
My name's Philip. I'm from Socialist Alternative, and I also was the campaign manager for the Seamus Sawant campaign last year in Seattle, and active in it again this year. So I wanted to speak. Mainly, I was originally planning speaking on our experiences in Seattle, but I did want to respond to some of the points that Carl Davidson raised that I think are actually key political issues that need to be grappled with in terms of building an independent left to the Democrats. I definitely agree the point that theory is gray and life is green. Things are never straightforward and they're often much more messy and complex than we expect, and there's a need for flexible tactics. But I don't agree with your conclusions from that, and I'd also point out that one thing that stands out on the U.S. left since the 1930s is extreme tactical rigidity of supporting the Democratic Party. That's been the dominant, the main approach, and that has that work. In terms of, just a few quick examples. In terms of, just to take in terms of, is it helpful for building movements? Other people have made points about that, but I'd point to the question of the healthcare debate in 2010. The role that the Progressive Caucus played in the Democratic Party was crucial in demobilizing and destroying a movement for single payer. Some of them spoke about it, but when there was protests in 2010, I was there in Seattle. There was a mass protest on health care. The main people at the forefront were calling for single payer. The Democrats who pulled that together and the SEIU leaders they actually demanded that we put away our single payer signs. We weren't allowed to speak, and they never called a demonstration again because they saw single payer was the most popular issue. And all the members of the Progressive Caucus, in the end, voted for Obamacare. So the idea that the Progressive Caucus was putting some sort of pressure on Obama was the exact opposite. Obama was putting pressure on them to shut up and drop the issue of single payer. And they were putting pressure on movements outside the Democratic Party to drop the issue of single payer. The same thing happened to the anti-war movement in 2004 and 2008. In 2011, it was Wisconsin. The Democratic Party, Seamus made the point, destroyed the Wisconsin movement of channeling everything into the recall effort, which was a dead end. Socialist Alternative was there. I was there at that time. We warned that the strength was actually on the streets in terms of organizing a general strike. And the strategy of going to the Democrats, which a lot of labor leaders and progressive Democrats put forward, actually completely destroyed that movement. So, yes, we need flexible tactics. And when are we going to wake up to the fact that orienting towards the Democratic Party actually demobilizes movements, lowers consciousness, and doesn't help strengthen the left? Occupy in 2012 was shipwrecked on the issue of the 2012 elections. So just in terms of Seattle, we had a very strong candidate, a credible campaign. And it points to, I think, a limitation of the strategies putting forward about it's a tactical issue. None of the groups that traditionally support the Democrats were prepared to support a viable left challenge, in a two-party race, a socialist and a Democrat. There's no even Republican in the race. Did the Labor Council support us? No. Did most of the trade unions support us? No. Did Planned Parenthood or the civil rights organizations? Did Progressive Democrats of America? No. We're running again this year, and we're waiting for what we'd like to see if the PDA will support us. We welcome that as a step in the right direction. The final point I'd make is, I think we have to wake up to there is a historical crisis of the political system in the U.S. There's an unprecedented discrediting of the political establishment. The political system is in crisis. It's dysfunctional. The Republican Party is in disarray. The fact is, actually, even though Obama's the most popular capitalist politician in the U.S., the Democratic Party is in a deep crisis in terms of its popular legitimacy. This is a historic opportunity, and Occupy was an expression of that. Occupy was not an expression of trying to reform the Democratic Party or illusions the Democratic Party. In 2012, it crashed on that, but it was an explosion of popular discontent against the whole political establishment. And the point I'm getting at is, the issue is of left regroupment. I agree with what Seamus was saying about that. But the 2014 elections are coming up, and Obama's support is falling. The Democrats are disappointing. There's a massive disillusionment taking place with the Democrats. What's going to happen in the 2014 elections? We could easily see a repeat of 2010 of the Republicans on a populist basis exploiting that. Not because the country's so right-wing, but because if it's just simply a binary choice and there's discontent, people will vote for the other guys. The left needs to get together and unite, not in one organization, as Seamus was saying, but we need to build broad left alliances with the Greens, with socialist groups, with anti-cuts coalitions, to run independent anti-cuts, left-wing, working-class challenges to the Democrats and tap into that anger that we have no control. That anger is going to grow against both Obama and the Republicans, but Obama and the Democrats are going to be at the forefront of it because they're the ones in power.
I think we'll give Carl a chance.
So I'd like to hear what you think about that.
A lot. I'll try to be brief. One of the first rules of politics is knowing how to count. If you think you could have gotten a general strike in Wisconsin, you don't know how to count. The mass struggle in Wisconsin, the mass action of the workers, the farmers, and different people, had gone about as far as it could go. Some people argue that they think it could have gone forever onwards and upward to the point of view of a general strike. I call that an anarcho-syndicalist delusion. It went just about as far as it can go in terms of mobilizing the masses, because I know how to count where the views are of the working class and the farmers and people of Wisconsin. How many of them vote Republican? How many of them vote Democrat? What their views are on Walker? What their views are on the social issues? They went about as far as they could with the mass struggle, and therefore turning to the recall was one viable tactic that was still open to them, and they nearly won it. One of the main reasons they didn't want it is that there were a bunch of leftists who should have known better, who should have gone out into every little town and every little county. They didn't have to do it under the aegis of the Democratic Party. They could have organized working class communities and councils in every little town and every little county in Wisconsin for the recall, which would have made it stronger and which may have put it over the top, but they didn't. They decided to stay on the sideline of the recount. And I think that was the biggest failure of the left, not the failure of the left. To think that the Democratic Party somehow sabotaged the general strike. First of all, you don't know, it means you don't know very much about the size of the trade union movement in this country. You don't even know much about labor law. General strikes are against the law. They are. That's why.
Well, Occupy was against the law.
No, Occupy was not against the law. It was not against the law. You have the right to assemble. But according to the Taft-Hartley Act, you do not have the right to call a general strike. Your union could be taken over, busted up, and fined $1 million a day for calling a general strike. You can come out with sympathy for a mass action and make some kind of statements like that, but it is illegal in the United States of America to call for a general strike. It's even illegal to call for a secondary boycott in the United States. That's the reactionary law that was imposed upon us. Which gets me to another question. The left has not consistently followed the argument that I've had. The left has had a number of positions. We had a huge third party movement in 1948, the Progressive Party. There have been other efforts by the left, Peace and Freedom Party, other kinds of parties that we've had. We've had a range of experience with the different parties. None of them have worked out all that well. And only a few of the left have actually been engaged in it. The Democratic Socialists of America, the Communist Party. Most of us have stayed away from politics like the plague. You know, we have maybe 30 socialist groups in the United States, and most of them, so my question to them, if you think our strategy hasn't worked, how's yours doing?
All right, let's give Seamus a chance to respond.
Now, one final point. I happen to support your campaign in Seattle. I think it's a great idea. I encourage all of our members to support it. Likewise, like Dan Labatt's campaign in Ohio. I think it would have been a great idea. He only got 2% of the vote. But in Youngstown, Ohio, which is just right up the road from me, that's 1,000 workers voted for Labatt's. If I had a list of only 100 of those 1,000 workers who voted for Labatt, I could have done wonders with it. To me, that's the value of that kind of campaign. I'm not against those sorts of things. I am for them. I'm for that. I think so that the campaign you guys are doing in Seattle is terrific. And if I was there, I would be working on it. But I also think that if you think that Wisconsin could have had a general strike to bring down Walker, that you're living in la la land.
All right, I'm going to give Seamus a chance to respond.
Yeah, I think the Wisconsin question is actually a very important question, and the lessons for that are key for the labor movement, but also the general movement in society. Social Alternative actually had a large number of people on the ground, actively involved in the day-to-day. We have a very interesting book pamphlet on that, Lessons in Wisconsin, which is worth checking out on our website. But the idea that the analysis that the mood wasn't there or people weren't prepared to actually go on general strike is not true. The opposition to general strike came from the conservative labor leaders and the Democrats nationally and within Wisconsin. There was a number of actually local unions that were supportive of the general strike. But the rank and file of the people that went out and were inspired at demonstrations, there was overwhelming support for the idea of a general strike. And that was beginning to popularize and to grow until the push from conservative labor leaders and Democrats to pull that movement back into the confines of a get out the vote. And we've seen that that was the graveyard of that movement. Now, we don't see that a one day, what Social Alternative called for at the time, and what was getting an echo, was the idea of a one-day public sector general strike. Not that that would have defeated Walker, but that could have been the next logical step to take the movement forward. Movements don't kind of emerge and then have victory or whatever. There's a method, or there's a way that movements are built or whatever. If a movement doesn't take the next progressive step forward to lead the movement in a direction, then reaction, and it goes back, it falls back. It's not an exhaustible thing. And the next logical step to build that movement was the call for a one-day public sector general strike. That would have mobilized people and shown people even more that they had the power. And then there would have been a next step after that. What defeated that movement was the movement for the Democrats to squash that movement, because Wisconsin was an example. And the best thing to blame the left for the fact that the recall movement didn't succeed is ridiculous. The reason the recall movement didn't succeed was that the right-wing Republicans, the right-wing Democrat that they pushed forward wasn't a whole lot of difference.
Really?
Voters saw,
Amen.
well, why should I vote for a right-wing Democrat or a right-wing Republican? Most of them didn't vote. There was no inspiration to actually to make that decision. That's the reality on the ground.
Okay, questions. I'm gonna get to David but first back here and then back.
I have a question for Carl. I like a lot of the things you said.
Can you speak up?
Okay, I'm sorry. I like a lot of the things you said, and a lot of some things I disagree with. But something that I really like is how you. I have a question. Do you think? I want to understand better when you talk about like. Do you agree with like involving normal people, like the people, the voters, into like what they're doing, like informing, like what you're doing, like instead of being more like sitting and just like doing like your work yourself and everything? How do you? I don't know how to phrase my question. How would you like make sure that like the people that you're trying to help, are informed and know what's going on and what you're doing? Since like you mentioned yourself that you organization, right? Make sure that certain like party members or not or runners don't win or anything. Do you like consider that the voters should be involved in this? So like, do you inform the people that about like why they shouldn't or why like you inform your ideas or anything? Or do you think it's important to have them involved in like what you're doing?
It's very important for your organization to have a public face.
Yeah.
For instance, we have a website for our organization called Beaver County Blue, beavercountyblue.org. If you want to check it out, it's got the whole history of everything we've done. In addition, we have what we call progressive breakfasts, where we invite local labor leaders, key activists, some politicians, depending on where they're at. We have one coming up this week on a new trade deal. We've got 100 people signed up for it already. Where we have bringing in speakers. We have dinners and a movie where we bring out several hundred people, have a dinner. Almost all working class people. We show Michael Moore's film or some film like that on documentaries that educate people on the political issues of the day. Norman Sullivan's film, Iraq of the War, the Iraq War. We did that to promote the anti-war movement, educate people. But we also put up our tables. We have the Raccoon County or Raccoon Township Fair. I put up a table there with voter registration, PDA, and I put some Obama literature up on it. And I had some bumper stickers. And I had these 4 girls come by and say, "Can we have your bumper stickers?" I said, "I only have 4 left. Will you put them on your car?" "No, we want to put them on our back." And this is 1,000 white workers in a left, center, right-wing populist area. And these young kids, what they saw Obama was a way to be anti-racist and stick it in the face of the right wing. That's what it meant practically on the ground, to put an Obama bumper sticker on your back and wear it around that fair. There were 1,000 people there, and there were only 2 blacks there in the whole damn thing. And we won 40% of that Democratic, 45% of that demographic to vote for Obama against McCain. The Democrats for McCain were sponsored by the Tea Party right. So you have to look at these things very concretely. And what we were doing, working for Obama or vote for Obama, was a vote against racism, basically. And it was a mobilization of the sector of the white working, the most progressive-minded sector of the white working class, to put on an Obama T-shirt along with their pickup trucks with the guns in the back and go out knocking door to door on union households. It was a stand against racism.
Okay.
Don't you ever forget it. And it was very important that they did so. Did they have illusions about Obama? Most of them, no. They were willing to give the black guy a chance. They have fewer illusions about the Democratic Party than the people in this room. They know it very well. But they also know the Republican Party probably better than people in this room. And they make their choices tactically. They figure out who's going to do me the least harm. And on that basis, they vote.
Okay, let's try to get 2 more questions in here. Keep it short because we're really short on time here. Start with David.
Yeah, I happen to be in the Green Party. I'm an activist for the D.C. Statehood Green Party, which is D.C.'s second party. We beat the Republicans in the general election by 19,000 votes. So here's an interesting configuration, because the D.C. is about 50% black now. It's still majority people of color, and it's Democrat. You know, it's run by Democrats who are basically following the agenda of finance capital, the federal city council. And so we have great disparities. Half of black kids in D.C. live in poverty. So we see our party as being basically a force to challenge this program from a left point of view. And, you know, for tax justice and all the rest, for rights of formerly incarcerated, which are 10% of the population, we call them returning citizens. Point, though, in terms of our discussion, is the inside-outside strategy. That seems to be... Now, I happen to think that my organization I belong to, the Committees of Correspondence, the foot that's outside has largely fell asleep. Okay? And I greatly value my comrade here and the work he's doing, but I think the Green Party is absolutely imperative in as we face the increasing danger of climate catastrophe. The Green Party has a program to deal with it, and the Green New Deal, and we have to begin to decarbonize under capitalism. We can't wait until we get socialism. We have to begin the process, and we have to create the mass base. I'm an eco-socialist. We have to create the mass base, and I respect all of the different socialist groups that are putting out this vision. But to me, the Green Party, we may have a convergence in the future with the Progressive Party, the left of Labor, whatever. But to me, the Green Party is the best organized national party, and I think that. And my oldest son, by the way, was elected to alderman in Peter Schwartzman in Galesburg, Illinois, as a member of the Green Party of Illinois. But okay, my question. All right, I'm not speaking as long as other people, but my question is: given the time frame we have left to maybe avoid climate catastrophe, how should our electoral politics be shaped to capture that? Okay, that challenge. Okay. How should we shape our electoral policy? I'd like everyone to respond to that.
Yeah, I think we're also running really short on time, so maybe we'll just, if anyone wants to respond to that and some concluding remarks. Ursula?
Yeah, I'll respond to it. Well, the challenge of that is that it's something that has to be either national or has to be coordinated nationally, solutions to the climate crisis. So, there's what we've talked about, having local solutions from municipal power, for example, and decentralized power generation that can happen through municipally owned power, and also advocating for bans for these unconventional fossil fuels that I think can happen at the state level, and that it's just harder to capture national political office, federal office. But that's why it's really imperative to have some local victories to create the stepping stones for statewide victories. And that's why I think it's so imperative that if if the Democrats, take on a climate action plan and a fracking ban, then great. At least like they're going to implement some kinds of solutions, and so that's kind of a quick response to that.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks all the panelists for coming out, and thank you.